Access Minnesota. Issues that matter to you. Access Minnesota brings you the newsmakers and the stories that shape our everyday lives, with analysis from University of Minnesota faculty experts.
A main part of President Obama's plan to improve education involves promoting high-quality teachers and phasing out ineffective ones. But what exactly are the qualities of a good teacher, and how can we tell when someone is a good teacher? This month on Access Minnesota, we look at how the University of Minnesota's Curriculum and Instruction Department is preparing the next generation of teachers. And we talk with Assistant Professor Misty Sato about her work implementing teacher assessments in the schools. Misty Sato is an assistant professor in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction in the College of Education and Human Development at the University of Minnesota. Misty, welcome to Access Minnesota.
Thanks very much, Jim.
You're involved with the training of teachers. What are some of the qualities that make for a good teacher?
We have, within the state of Minnesota and even nationally, a set of very well-defined standards for what makes for a quality teacher. Certainly we want teachers to have a strong knowledge of the subject matter that they're teaching. But in addition to that, we also want teachers to have a very strong base on what student learning or child development is from a theoretical perspective and how that development happens over time for children as they move from early childhood into early adolescence and into the later high school years. There's also a lot about instructional materials and strategies that teachers need to know to be a good teacher. Standards around setting up productive learning environments, knowing curriculum materials and how to evaluate curriculum materials that are going to really meet the needs of the students who are in their classrooms are another dimension of what teachers need to know. Included in that would be keeping pace with current technologies that are used for instructional practices and to support student learning.
How do we know when someone is a good teacher?
Well, this is a question that a lot of people can answer just from their own experiences as having been in classrooms. They know a good teacher when they've had a productive and positive relationship with someone, when they have felt supported and been had that experience where they've had very moments of learning where they can really identify that something positive has happened for them. When we're thinking about good teachers more from a research perspective, we tend to look a little bit more at the kinds of things that I was just identifying from these standards. Do they have the content knowledge? Do they know how to design an instructional environment for kids to be able to learn? So good teaching becomes this question that we answer from multiple perspectives, from the individual experience that the child has, and then also from do they have the skills and abilities that you know are effective for learning from more of a research perspective. As right now we're in this sort of conversation at the national level and with a lot of policymakers about good teaching being strongly identified with the outcomes for the students. And those outcomes tend to get very focused in on, are they performing well on standardized achievement tests? And can we measure that over time? Can we measure growth of students on these tests over time? So with that definition of good teaching, we get a very narrow look at what effective outcomes are, and we sometimes miss those qualities that people would identify as good teaching from their own experience, the more relationship-based or supportive or that personal contact that someone feels with a teacher. And we still struggle with how to really make those personal dimensions part of a way of identifying good teaching more systematically, because the measures of those kinds of features are very difficult to develop and apply over a large group of people.
You've done research on something called formative assessment. First of all, please tell us what that is and what have you learned through your research?
Well, formative assessment is a framework for thinking about teaching that shifts the way that we have traditionally thought about teaching from a deliver the curriculum and then sort of hope that the students uptake it. Like we're providing the right bite-sized pieces for students to digest and take in as learners. And shifting it from the delivery aspect to the aspect of learning on the student's part. With formative assessment, we want to put more focus on not the end product, but how are we supporting student learning over time. delivering a little bit of instruction, checking in to see how the students are doing, trying out introducing a new set of content material, checking in to see how the students are understanding that at deep levels. So rather than being sort of a punctuated assessment that happens at the end of instruction, formative assessment is supportive throughout the whole learning experience for the students. So these practices, instead of looking like tests and quizzes, might look like how the teacher listens to student responses and then frames the right question that will then allow the student to go deeper into their thinking and make their thinking visible by talking about their ideas in classes. And that can happen individually, that can happen in small groups, that can happen one-on-one between the student and the teacher. So again, like the difference here is shifting our thinking from instruction that's delivery and then testing to see if kids know it at the end, and instruction that is supportive by ongoing check-ins with the students about what they're learning and what they're understanding, and then the emphasis is on deepening that understanding, not just checking in at one point in time.
How do teachers respond to formative assessment?
Well, it's a big shift in this mindset of what it is that teachers are doing in the classroom. Designing instruction for delivery of content is a little more clean and straightforward. When you put the student into the equation and really understanding, are they learning what we're trying to teach, the job of the teacher becomes much more complex. So the response is teachers trying to figure out how it works. We know from years and years of research on formative assessment that this is a very effective set of practices that can improve student learning. What we don't really know, and what we've been learning through the research I've been doing, is how do you help teachers learn how to use these practices and how to really tune in to students' comments and questions and work in ways that are ongoing and supportive of their learning. It means that the teacher really has to know much more about the levels of understanding within the content area that they're teaching. They can't just know the right answer, they have to know what the steps are that the kids are taking to get to an answer that's reasonable, and then moving on to a higher level of understanding of that content. It means that the teachers have to spend more time on individualized instruction, which is very difficult to do if you've got more than 20 kids or 25 kids. And we have high school science classrooms now with teachers where I'm working that have 40 kids in a high school science lab. So to individualize that support for learning becomes just practically challenging when you're trying to use practices that are focused on supporting learning. So teachers embrace it, but it's complex, difficult work, and we are always trying to figure out how to make that practically work within the situations that the teachers are in.
When Access Minnesota returns, more of our conversation with Assistant Professor Misty Sato about the process of evaluating teacher performance in the classroom.
Access Minnesota will return after these messages.